If guilt works on you, you're already owned. There's a weapon being used against you right now, and most people never see it coming. It doesn't look like aggression. It doesn't sound like a threat. It comes wrapped in concern, delivered with disappointment, dressed up as care. Someone tells you they're hurt by your choices. They remind you of what they've done for you. They suggest you're being selfish, cold, ungrateful, and something inside you twists. You feel bad. You second-guess yourself. You consider changing your decision just to make that feeling stop. And in that moment, you've been controlled. Because guilt is not a compass pointing you toward right action. Guilt is a leash, and someone just gave it a tug to see if you'll come to heel. Machiavelli understood this mechanism 5 centuries ago. He watched the power players of Renaissance Italy and noticed something crucial. The ones who controlled others most effectively weren't the ones with the most soldiers. They were the ones who understood human psychology. They knew that you don't need physical force when you can install psychological buttons and push them at will. And the guilt button is the most powerful one, because it turns your own conscience against you. It makes you police yourself. It makes you surrender without anyone having to demand it. You just feel so terrible about disappointing them, about being selfish, about not living up to what they deserve, that you voluntarily hand over your autonomy. This is what Machiavelli would call masterful control. And you're the puppet who doesn't even see the strings. Let's be absolutely clear about what guilt is and what it isn't. Healthy guilt is an internal signal that you violated your own values. You lied when you value honesty. You hurt someone when you value kindness. You broke a commitment when you value integrity. That guilt is useful. It's your conscience doing its job. It helps you course correct and align your behavior with who you want to be. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about manufactured guilt. Guilt that's imposed on you by someone else to serve their agenda. Guilt that arises not because you did something wrong, but because you did something they didn't like. And the manipulator has learned that if they can make you feel like you did something wrong, they can make you do what they want. Here's how the guilt script works. Someone wants something from you. Your time, your energy, your compliance, your resources. But they can't just demand it directly, because that would reveal them as entitled or controlling. So instead, they make you feel like you're failing them by not giving it. They don't say, "I want you to do this." They say, "I can't believe you would do this to me." They don't say, "Your boundary is inconvenient for me." They say, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me." They don't say, "I'm angry you're prioritizing yourself." They say, "I'm just really hurt and disappointed," and notice what happens. The focus shifts from what they want to what you're supposedly doing wrong. You're no longer defending a reasonable boundary. You're defending yourself against the charge of being a bad person. Niccolo Machiavelli wrote that the one who deceives will always find someone ready to be deceived. The guilt manipulator deceives you about the nature of the situation. They frame your self-preservation as selfishness. They frame your boundary as betrayal. They frame your autonomy as cruelty. And if you're someone who cares about being good, about not hurting people, about being fair and kind, you'll buy into that frame. You'll accept that maybe you are being selfish, maybe you are being unfair, Maybe you should feel guilty. And once you've accepted that frame, you've already lost. Because now you're trying to prove you're not a bad person by doing what they want, which was the goal all along. Let's examine the specific guilt scripts manipulators deploy. First, the debt script. After everything I've done for you. This implies you owe them, that their past actions created an obligation that you're now failing to honor. But here's what they're not saying. Healthy relationships don't operate on a debt model. When someone does something for you in a genuine relationship, it's a gift, not a loan. It doesn't create an obligation for you to comply with their future demands. If they're keeping score, if they're cataloging everything, they've done so they can use it as leverage later. That's not generosity. That's investment in future control, and you don't owe interest on an investment you never agreed to. Second, the disappointment script. I'm just so disappointed in you. This weaponizes your desire to be seen positively by people you care about. The manipulator positions themselves as someone whose approval matters and then withdraws that approval to punish your boundary. The implication is that good people, people worthy of their regard, wouldn't make the choice you're making. So if you want to be restored to their good graces, you need to reverse your decision. But notice the power dynamic they're asserting. They're positioning themselves as the authority who determines whether you're good enough, and your job is to perform for their approval. That's not a relationship between equals. That's a relationship between judge and supplicant. Third, the suffering script. You're really hurting me. This makes your boundary into an act of violence against them. It takes a neutral choice that simply doesn't serve their preferences and reframes it as intentional harm. And if you're someone with empathy, someone who doesn't want to hurt people, this script is devastating, because now you're faced with a choice. Maintain your boundary and be someone who hurts people, or surrender your boundary and be someone who's kind. But that's a false choice. Your boundary isn't hurting them. Their entitlement to control you is what's creating their discomfort, their hurt that you won't comply, not that you're actually harming them, and there's a profound difference. Fourth, the comparison script. Everyone else would do this. This creates artificial social pressure by implying that your boundary is abnormal, that you're the outlier, that reasonable people would comply. It isolates you by suggesting that you're alone in thinking this boundary is acceptable. And humans are social creatures. We're deeply affected by the perception that we're outside the norm. So this script leverages that discomfort to push you back toward compliance. But it's also usually a lie. They don't actually know what everyone else would do. They're just asserting it to make you feel like the problem. And even if it were true, even if everyone else would comply, that doesn't make compliance right. It just means everyone else is also being controlled. Fifth, the relationship threat script. I don't know if I can have a relationship with someone who would do this. This is the nuclear option. It makes your boundary an existential threat to the relationship itself. The implication is that maintaining this boundary means losing them. And if you value the relationship, that's a terrifying prospect. So you'll weigh it. Is this boundary worth losing this person? And often you'll decide it's not, and you'll surrender. But here's what's actually happening. They're threatening to leave if you don't submit. That's not love. That's hostage-taking. A person who genuinely cares about you might be disappointed by your choice, but they wouldn't make the relationship conditional on your compliance with their preferences. That conditionality reveals that the relationship was never about you as a person. It was about you as a resource. Now let's talk about why guilt works so effectively on certain people. If you were raised in an environment where your worth was conditional, where love was given and withdrawn based on compliance, you're extraordinarily vulnerable to guilt manipulation because you learned early that the way to be safe, to be loved, to be accepted, is to monitor other people's feelings and adjust your behavior to keep them happy. You learned that your needs are less important than other people's comfort. You learned that setting a boundary makes you bad. And those lessons didn't go away when you became an adult. They're still running in the background, making you susceptible to anyone who knows how to trigger them. The manipulator doesn't need to know your history. They just need to deploy the guilt script and watch for the response. If you immediately start defending yourself, explaining your reasoning, trying to make them understand why you're not actually a bad person, they know it worked. You've accepted the frame. You're trying to prove your innocence to a judge who's already decided you're guilty. And every explanation you give is more data for them to use. They'll find the flaw in your reasoning. They'll explain why your priorities are wrong. They'll keep moving the goalposts until you exhaust yourself and give in, because the game was never about understanding you. It was about making you submit. Machiavelli wrote that one who deceives will always find those willing to be deceived. But he also wrote about how a prince must learn not to be good when necessity demands it. Applied to guilt manipulation, this means you must be willing to disappoint people. You must be willing to be seen as selfish. You must be willing to let them be hurt by your boundary, not because you're cruel, but because you recognize that their hurt is their responsibility, not yours. They're hurt because you won't comply. That's their problem. Your job is not to manage their emotions by surrendering your autonomy. Your job is to make decisions that are right for you, and let them handle their own feelings about it. Here's the ruthless rule that breaks their leverage instantly. Refuse to accept guilt for choices that serve your well-being. When someone deploys a guilt script, you don't defend yourself. You don't explain why you're not actually being selfish. You don't try to make them understand your reasoning. You acknowledge their feeling without accepting responsibility for it. I understand you're disappointed. I hear that you're upset. I recognize this isn't what you wanted. And then you hold your boundary. No apology, no negotiation, no acceptance of the guilt they're trying to install. Because the moment you apologize for a choice that was right for you, you've confirmed that they have the authority to judge your choices, and they don't. Let's walk through what this looks like in practice. A family member uses the debt script. After everything I've done for you, you're really not going to help me with this? Old response: I know, and I'm so grateful, but I just can't right now because of these reasons, and I feel terrible about it. New response: I appreciate what you've done for me. I'm not available for this. They escalate. So all those times I helped you mean nothing? You hold. They mean a lot, and I'm still not available. No defense, no justification, No acceptance of the debt frame, just a clear boundary. A friend uses the disappointment script. I'm really disappointed you're not coming to my event. Old response. No, I'm so sorry. I wish I could, but I have this thing, and I feel awful. Maybe I can leave early from the thing and come late. New response. I understand you're disappointed. I won't be able to make it. They push. I just thought you'd be there for me. You hold. I understand what you hoped. This is what I'm able to do. No apology for having other commitments. No negotiation about partial attendance. Just acknowledgement and boundary. A partner uses the suffering script. It really hurts that you need space from me. Old response. I'm sorry. I don't mean to hurt you. It's not about you. Let me explain exactly why I need this so you understand. It's not rejection. New response. I understand this is difficult for you. I need this space. They escalate. If you cared about me, you wouldn't do something that hurts me. You hold. I do care about you. I'm still taking this space. No acceptance that caring about them means sacrificing your needs. No apology for having boundaries. Just acknowledgement and holding firm. Notice the pattern. You're not being cruel. You're not dismissing their feelings. You're acknowledging that they feel how they feel. But you're refusing to accept that their feelings are your fault or your responsibility to fix by surrendering your boundary. This distinction is everything. The guilt manipulator wants you to believe that if someone feels bad about your choice, you must change your choice. But that's not true. People are allowed to feel bad about your choices, and you're allowed to make choices that disappoint them. These two things can coexist, and you refusing to fix their feelings by betraying yourself is not cruelty. It's boundaries. The manipulator will escalate when this method doesn't work. They'll get more dramatic. They'll recruit others to pressure you. They'll claim you're being cold, robotic, uncaring. Good. Let them. Because their escalation is proof that you're doing it right. If they respected your autonomy, your simple boundary statement would be the end of it. The fact that they're escalating reveals that they never saw you as an equal with the right to make your own choices. They saw you as someone who exists to comply with their preferences, and your refusal to play that role is threatening to them. Let it be threatening. That's not your problem to solve. Machiavelli observed that people judge more by their eyes than by their hands, meaning people respond more to how things appear than to reality. When you apologize and over-explain and try to make the guilt go away, you appear guilty. You appear like someone who knows they did something wrong and is trying to make amends. When you calmly hold your boundary without apology, you appear confident in your choice. You appear like someone who knows their decision is right and doesn't require external validation. And people respond to that appearance. Even the manipulator on some level will absorb the message that you're not someone whose guilt button works anymore. They might not like it, but they'll learn it. Here's what most people don't understand about guilt manipulators. They often don't know they're doing it. It's not always a conscious strategy. Many of them genuinely feel hurt when you set boundaries. They genuinely believe you're being selfish. They genuinely think you owe them compliance because they've built a worldview where other people exist to serve their needs, and any deviation from that service feels like betrayal. So when they express hurt and disappointment, it's real. They're not faking it. But that doesn't make it your responsibility. Their genuine feelings of entitlement don't create an obligation for you. You can have compassion for the fact that they're upset while still maintaining your boundary. The guilt script also reveals something important about the manipulator's view of relationships. They believe love is transactional, that if they do something for you, you owe them, that if you care about them, you'll prioritize their comfort over your well-being, that relationships are about one person managing the other person's emotions through compliance. This is a fundamentally broken model. Healthy relationships are about two autonomous people choosing to be in each other's lives, supporting each other when they can, respecting boundaries when they can't. There's no debt. There's no obligation to sacrifice yourself. There's mutual care within the context of mutual respect for autonomy. And if someone can't operate in that model, if they need the transactional guilt-based model to feel secure, that's information about whether they're capable of a healthy relationship with you. Let's address the fear that comes up when you start refusing to accept guilt. What if you actually are being selfish? What if your boundary is unreasonable? What if you're wrong? Here's the test. Ask yourself if you would accept this behavior from them. If they set the same boundary you're setting, would you guilt them about it? If not, then your boundary is fine. You're just holding yourself to a standard you wouldn't hold them to, which reveals that you've internalized the belief that your needs matter less. If you would accept the boundary from them, then you should accept it from yourself. And if they wouldn't accept it from you when you'd accept it from them, that asymmetry is the problem, not your boundary. Furthermore, even if your boundary is imperfect, even if you're making a choice that's not optimal, you're still allowed to make it. You're allowed to be wrong. You're allowed to prioritize yourself, even when it disappoints others. You're allowed to learn from mistakes. The alternative is a life spent in paralysis, afraid to make any choice that anyone might disapprove of, constantly seeking permission from others to live your own life. That's not virtue. That's bondage, and the manipulator wants you in bondage because that's how they maintain control. Machiavelli understood that the prince must be willing to act against faith, against charity, against humanity, against religion when necessary to preserve the state. Translated to personal relationships, you must be willing to act against the image of who you're supposed to be, against the demands of false loyalty, against manipulative appeals to your empathy when necessary to preserve yourself. This doesn't mean becoming cruel. It means becoming sovereign. It means recognizing that you are the ultimate authority on what's right for your life. And anyone who tries to guilt you out of that authority is attempting a coup. Here's the long-term effect of refusing guilt manipulation. You train people how to treat you. When you consistently refuse to accept guilt for reasonable boundaries, people learn that guilting you doesn't work. They might not like it. They might miss having that control, but they'll either adapt and relate to you with respect, or they'll leave. Both outcomes are wins for you. The people who adapt become healthier relationships. The people who leave were never healthy relationships in the first place. They were just control dynamics you mistook for connection. And losing those isn't loss, it's liberation. You'll also notice something remarkable happening internally. When you stop accepting false guilt, you get better at distinguishing between real and manufactured guilt. Your conscience becomes clearer. You can actually hear the signal because it's not being drowned out by all the noise of other people's manipulative agendas. You start making decisions based on your actual values instead of your fear of disappointing people. You develop integrity in the true sense, internal integration, where your choices align with your genuine beliefs rather than with external pressure. This is what it feels like to be an autonomous adult, and once you've felt it, you'll never willingly return to being controlled by guilt. The manipulator's greatest fear is that you'll realize guilt only works if you accept it. They can deploy the script. They can express disappointment, remind you of debts, claim you're hurting them. But if you simply acknowledge their feeling without accepting responsibility for it, without changing your behavior to alleviate it, the script has no power. It's like a key that no longer fits the lock because you changed the lock. They're still turning it, still expecting the door to open, but nothing happens. And eventually they'll either get a new key that actually works in healthy relationships, or they'll go find a door that still opens to manipulation. Either way, you're free. There's a spiritual dimension to this as well. Many religious and philosophical traditions talk about not being attached to outcomes, not being controlled by others' opinions, not sacrificing your integrity for approval. When you refuse guilt manipulation, you're practicing these principles. You're choosing internal alignment over external validation. You're choosing truth over comfort. You're choosing freedom over the false security of compliance. This is the path that every wisdom tradition points to in some form, and it requires courage, because it means standing alone sometimes. It means being misunderstood. It means being called selfish by people who want to own you, but the alternative is being owned. And once you truly understand that choice, there's only one acceptable answer to Machiavelli's final wisdom on this. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Applied to guilt manipulation, it is better to be seen as selfish than to be controlled. If people are going to accuse you of being selfish no matter what you do, you might as well actually prioritize yourself. If they're going to be disappointed in you, whether you set small boundaries or large ones, you might as well set the boundaries you actually need. If they're going to claim you're hurting them, regardless of how carefully you navigate it, you might as well make the choice that serves you, because their guilt script will deploy either way. The only variable is whether you accept it. So the next time someone tries to make you feel guilty for a boundary, for a choice, for prioritizing yourself, recognize it for what it is, a control attempt, not a genuine expression of hurt that you're responsible for fixing, not a sign that you did something wrong, not evidence that you need to change your decision, just someone pulling on the leash to see if you'll come to heel, and your response determines everything. If you accept the guilt, if you apologize, if you change your choice, you've confirmed that the leash works. They'll keep using it. If you acknowledge their feeling without accepting responsibility, if you hold your boundary calmly, if you refuse to be moved by their script, you've cut the leash. They can keep pulling, but there's nothing attached anymore. And that's when you discover what it feels like to be free. Because if guilt works on you, you're already owned. But the moment you refuse to accept false guilt is the moment you take yourself back.